Screen down the back. You can't? Should have gone to Specsavers. Okay, well, just a few little warm-ups for a start. I'd like to thank you for the wonderful fellowship my wife and I have had. We went to the Wednesday night meeting with Pastor Chris Kay, and that was an awesome presentation that he's done. And last night there was apparently some 18-year-old had a bit of a get-together. Happened to be in the place I was staying, so it was midnight before I hit the sack, but we'll overcome these things. But what we're going to talk about tonight, very quickly, is what you see in front of you. If I miss a few words as I go through, it's because of time. I'm quite mindful of the time. And I'd just like to say I'm aiming tonight basically at the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church, which is a follow-on from the Roman Empire. And Rome at the time obviously controlled most of the, right across Europe, and we've all seen that. But tonight, in the presence tonight, we have a few Rhodes scholars here. So if you have any questions about this presentation, go and see them. They'll put the hand up and they'll give you all the answers. Because tonight, it's a snapshot. I've got a control here somewhere. We're going to have a snapshot at the incredible sacrifices that a number of people made to translate the Hebrew and Greek. And I was going to, before I go any further, we'll go back to that one. Is there anyone here can read that? Put your hand up if you're game. Andy, you can read Greek and Hebrew? No, not the English, no. Oh dear. Oh dear. So, Greek and Hebrew, and there's no one here can read it, so I'm safe, okay? So I can put up whatever I like. But it's translating the Hebrew and Greek scriptures into English and the pathway to the King James Version. My target market tonight with all the people here is really people who've been in the Lord for perhaps 10 years or less. All the old scholars here will probably or should know everything I'm talking about tonight. All the young ones, 10, 15, 20, 25-year-olds could be, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that. Okay, so for a start, we're going to talk about the days. Today is Sunday, right through to Saturday. Not going to read them out because of time. You can see we're still hanging on. Back in the days of the Roman empires, they had all these false gods everywhere. That was the major obstacle for the Greek and Hebrew because, hang on, we've got our false gods. And even today, 2023 in Geelong, Sunday is the sun god, the moon god, all the way down the page. So that's a rollover from a couple thousand years ago. It's incredible, isn't it? So dark here, I can't see the switch. So we're focusing tonight on the Roman Empire, which flows directly through to the Roman Catholic Church. And I imagine some of us here have been to Rome. Every Wednesday, the Pope comes out and blesses everybody, and there's 10,000 people staying down there. And just around the corner, there's 4 people begging for food. It's quite an interesting place in St. Peter's Square. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the sacrifices that people took. And we're going to pick on Peter here. He championed the cause of Christ for 35 years. And he was martyred by Nero in 65 AD, 66 AD. And because Nero was still persecuting the Christians. It was a very unpleasant time for people who really believed in God and Jesus Christ. And there was no Bibles, there was plenty of Latin, which we'll talk about that in a moment, but there's no English. English is not to come along for some hundreds of years. Now, I was speaking to a certain person in the room before and was talking about different things that happened during this time. Again, I'm focusing on the Roman Catholic side, a snapshot only. So there's lots of things that I will miss because of time. So for the next few hundred years, not 10 or 20, but a few hundred years, Roman emperors issued a decree requiring public sacrifice to the gods. Notice little g, not the big G. Government officials visited cities and villages to ensure that citizens carried out these orders. Those refusing to obey were punished by imprisonment, torture, or death. And we complain about our taxes now. Well, we've got it pretty easy compared to what they did back then. And we go all the way through to 296 AD, a whole lot of things have happened. Diocletian realised that Christians were not being loyal to Rome. So he started persecuting them like never before. He demanded that all Christian soldiers resign from the army, ban gatherings of Christian meetings, order the destruction of churches and sacred writings. Because you've got false gods everywhere. You've got the Roman way, or you take the highway. If you're lucky enough, you get the highway. If you've been to Rome, there's a road, the Appian Way, leads from Rome down to the ports, and all the way down there was trees and posts and crosses and whatever where they used to hang all the Christians. Very, very spiritual people, the Romans. So for 300 years, the Hebrew and Greek texts of the Bible were only seen by a small minority of people, whilst the majority of people followed all their various gods. You saw some of them for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So 303, the emperors issued a series of edicts rescinding Christians' legal rights and demanding that they comply with traditional religious practices. Anyone who actually followed God and his holy scriptures were constantly placing their lives on the line. Millions and millions of Christians have died. Now, what sort of Christians, we don't know, but we'll just use the word broadly tonight, at the hands of the Romans. And that could be at the Appian Way there, I'm not too sure. So then along comes in 304, Diocletian's still around, he burned all the Bibles. All right, so we're heading towards the Catholic Church here, Romans onto the Catholic Church, burned all the Bibles in Rome and banned everyone from having one. Really, they did not want them to know the truth. And for those young ones, only 10% of people could actually read and write back in those days. 90% of people were illiterate, so they couldn't read anything. Now, there are Italians in Rome, of course, but it's Hebrew and Greek, and there's Latin business comes along, which confuses everyone. Put your hand up if you can speak Latin in here. No one, so I rest my case. 313 marks a very important time in Christian history when good old Constantine, he was a major person who did a lot of things, together with his eastern counterpart, I think it's Licinius, issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious toleration and the freedom for persecuted Christians. Now, if you want to do a little bit of study about Constantine, he was writing, and he saw the light and it made him think about it and he changed his mind and whatever. It's another story, but that was in 313. And then along comes Theodosius, and Catholicism officially became the state religion of the Roman Empire. And he was around 347 to 395 as the emperor. It was the emperor's way, not God's way. And 2 years later, Jerome of Stridon, a theologian, was commissioned by Pope Damasus to translate the Hebrew and Greek into Latin Vulgate, which none of us understand here, unless you're a really good ex-Catholic. But we won't go into that. We're not picking on the Catholics, we're picking on the system. Latin Vulgate is a late 4th century Latin translation of the Bible, way away from English at the moment. The Roman Catholic Church only used Latin Vulgate along with its countless variations, which totally changed the context of the Bible. Cut this out, put this in, and it was just the Romans Catholic way of keeping people under their spell. They did not want people to understand the truth. Why did they use Latin as their languages for prayers during the Mass? The Church used Latin for centuries because it was born in the Roman Empire. And when that empire fell, it kept as a way to unify Catholics around the world. Even many church documents are still translated into Latin. And recently, the Vatican launched a Latin radio station, which I'm sure you all tune into every day. In 500 AD, so, time is flying past. The scriptures have been translated into 500 languages in Latin. I'm not too sure how that works, but 500 different things. And 995 AD, Anglo-Saxon versions appeared, early roots of the English language. Now, we're only talking 1,000 years ago when the English bit starts coming along. There's a nice little pocket Bible there on the right. So for the next 1,000 years, right up to 1380, people generally just listened to countless versions of the Bible along with Roman Catholic canons, which totally distorted the scriptures. Total confusion, and as you see from the question marks there. Now, some of these names especially the younger folk here, like you try and remember some of them. These are major players. John Wycliffe was born in Yorkshire in 1330, educated at Oxford University. And I used to think Oxford University was like Deakin University or whatever, but actually it's the whole city is a university on 36 different campuses. And if you watch a little bit of TV, I think it's Midsummer Murders or Lewis or whatever, it's all set in that beautiful town. It's a magnificent city. So he was the first person to translate the Bible from Latin Vulgate into English. So that was a long, long time ago. Educated at Oxford University. And my readings tell me he was actually a Catholic priest. And in 1377, he decided, enough's enough, it's all rubbish, I'm going to attack my church. And that's what he did. He wasn't too happy. This is not a photo of him. You probably worked that out. He set himself up against the greatest organisation on earth because he sincerely believed that the organisation was wrong. We are all here tonight, this afternoon, because we sincerely believe we've got the King James Bible, we've got the truth. All the people said? Amen. Otherwise, we'll be out the door. One of his targets was transubstantiation. He'd condemned the doctrine as idolatrous and unscriptural. Now, the youngies may not know, they get the bread and turn it actually into his flesh and get the wine and turn it into his blood and whatever. We did that today, not. But that's one of their crazy practices. This was just a start. He spoke about selling of indulgences. Well, your great-great-great-grandfather died, but if you pay enough money to the Catholic Church, you can actually get them out of purgatory and put them into heaven, stuff like that. Fantasy stuff, absolutely fantasy. Pope Gregory, this is one of the best popes because you've got a great name, issued 5 papal letters denouncing Wycliffe's theories and tried to get Oxford University to condemn him. But he was their Doctor of Divinity. He was their number one banana as far as the church was concerned. So they ignored the Pope's request. In the meantime, between August 1380 and the summer of 1381, he was working on his rooms at Oxford to complete his translation of the Bible, which was eventually published 2 years later. And by the way, in blue writing, they're handwritten. So you get halfway through a page and you make a mistake, that page gets torn up and thrown in the bin, and they've got to start that page again. So he was lucky. He actually died of a stroke in 1384. So he avoided the... yes. Was it a what? A pen stroke. That would only come from Mr. Brad Rodder. I mention the name because I'm on TV here. Eventually, the monks and friars at Oxford were so fed up with Wycliffe, they actually said, no, we're not going to back you anymore, because he was saying, look, you're on the wrong track. This is not what God wants. This is not what's in the Greek and Hebrew scriptures. So he was seen as the first reformer, fighting on almost alone the hosts of medieval wickedness. And then along comes the Archbishop of Canterbury. He moved against Wycliffe. He's already dead, but he's moved against him. Can you work that out? He's already dead. And condemned many of his works, and all of his writings were banned. 30 years after that, the Ecclesiastical Council condemned him as a heretic, and 14 years after that, if you had to start adding those years up, at the Pope's request, they dug his body up, they burnt it, and threw his ashes and bones into the river, just to make sure that there was nothing left of him. That's how, they were so worried about the truth getting out. Then along comes Jan. Some might say Jan, it's Jan. Correct me if I'm wrong. A Czech who lived around 1390, was inspired by John Wycliffe, his writings, and was very vocal in criticising the Catholic Church for being greedy and having 2 popes at the same time who were trying to kill each other. And most of the working class couldn't read at all, so Jan decided to hold free lectures on the Bible in Prague, and for his efforts, he was burned at the stake, screaming, "Truth prevails." The "Truth prevails" statement eventually became the national motto of the Czech Republic. It's incredible, fantastic. And along comes the printing press at long last. And I don't think there's anyone in this room who was alive in 1455. That's questionable, but in 1455, this fellow, Mr. Gutenberg, invented the printing press, and production of the Bible begins, except in Latin. So we're talking 500-600 years ago, things really start warming up a little bit. And then we all know this character, Martin Luther. We'll jump right up to 1517. Also was a German priest, author and professor, and he was a major figure in the Protestant Reformation. His beliefs form the basis of Lutheranism. He came to reject several teaching and practices of the Roman Catholic Church. In particular, he disputed the view on indulgences. And there's an indulgence certificate there. Luther proposed an academic discussion of the practice and efficacy of indulgences in his 99 thesis of 1517. His refusal to renounce all of his writings at the demand of Pope Leo in 1520 and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V at the Edict of Worms, it's another story, in 1521, resulted in his excommunication by the Pope and condemnation as an outlaw by the Holy Roman Emperor. And he stuck his statements to the church at Wittenberg, and he wasn't a very popular person because, once again, the Roman Catholic Church has been exposed. The Edict of Worms, which basically forbade anyone to shelter Martin Luther or provide him with aid, the edict stated that Luther should be captured and punished as a heretic, which at the stake, and so on. The Edict of Worms in 1521 was a critical moment in the Protestant Reformation. And this swept through into the 1500s. It resulted in the creation of a branch of Christianity called Protestantism, a name used collectively to refer to the many religious groups that separated from the Roman Catholic Church due to differences in doctrine. And by this time, millions of people have died because of Catholics versus Protestants and whatever. There's been that many wars. And right now, today, we have a war between basically the Muslims and the Jews, and it's just going on century after century. The Reformation was a very violent period in Europe. Even family members often pitted one against the other. And you see the picture there. It's basically, if you like, Russia versus Ukraine. The same people killing each other, brothers and sisters. It's just absolutely not on. Each side, both Catholics and Protestants, were often absolutely certain that they were right and that they were on the right side, and the other side was doing the devil's work. Now, we know now that we unfortunately had to go to a funeral yesterday in Drysdale. One of my cousins passed away, and there was a Catholic priest running the service. Well, Vera and I were just absolutely horrified staying there because he was an Italian fellow, really couldn't speak clear English, had no idea who my cousin was lying in the coffin, and the whole thing was just clinical. It was nothing at all, and the scriptures, he twisted them around, and the only good thing about that funeral was the wake afterwards, the food wasn't too bad. Then along comes Tyndale. He completes his translation of the Bible into English, went into print 5 years later. So now we're really starting to get into a situation where we can get the Bible out to around the world. And he was also educated at Oxford and a chaplain who spoke 7 languages. Put your hands up if you can speak 7 languages. Brad can, but I think some of them are double Dutch. But Tyndale was condemned for his heresy and strangled. Now, we've said Wycliffe, a name to remember, and look at that, look it up. And Tyndale, another name to remember, was condemned for heresy and strangled and then burned at the stake. His last words were, "O Lord, open the King of England's eyes." And that king was King Henry VIII. 3 years later, his prayer was answered when King Henry allowed the Bible in every parish church in England. The king also booted the Pope out because the Pope didn't agree with his marriage circumstances. As you know, some of the wives' heads rolled and all that sort of business, but that's another story. And King Henry became the head of the Church of England. And Coverdale in 1339 finished the Great Bible, which was approved by Henry VIII, but Queen Mary took the throne. She took away all Coverdale's religious authority. Most believed that he would be executed, but the King of Denmark persuaded Mary to send him to Denmark instead of killing him. So he was one of the very few that managed to escape. And another guy you may have not have heard of too much is John Rogers, in 37, was an English clergyman, a translator and a commentator. He guided the development of the Matthew Bible in vernacular English during the reign of the king and was the first Protestant executed as a heretic under Mary I of England. So the Catholics are doing a pretty good job here. Anyone gets in the way or tries to print something, kill them. In 1603, along comes James VI of Scotland, who became James I of Great Britain. This is the James that's got written on the front of your book, King James, and thus uniting the two kingdoms. He was born from the line of David and was a lifelong Protestant. So during James' journey to London, James was presented with a petition of the Puritans, English Protestants, calling for reforms within the Church of England. And in London, more petitions from the Puritans followed, and James called a meeting of churchmen and theologians to investigate. In 1604, at the Hampton Court Conference, that was one of King Henry's palaces, which he quite nicely just took off someone else who built it, made the suggestion that a new translation of the Bible be created and that be a complete translation of the whole Bible as close as possible to the Hebrew and Greek texts, the Bible sitting on your laps or under your chair. And that was accepted by King James. So, hang on, we've got problems here because all the Jesuits and other devout Roman Catholic supporters thought this can't happen. We can't allow the King James Bible to come forward because it's not what the Catholic Church want. And we read here that there was a plot to blow up the House of Lords with King James and quite a few other scholars who were in the building at the same time. The House of Lords right beside Big Ben, right beside the Thames River. And if you look at the picture there, the guy third from the right with the blue hat, matter of fact, he's the only one with a blue hat. Oh, there's third from the right, Guy Fawkes. And most of the young kids here wouldn't know that when we were kids, Guy Fawkes was a very, very celebrated cracker day. You get all these crackers and throw them around and burn a few houses down or something. But I think all that's been banned now. So Guy Fawkes was one of the major characters, along with the guy to his right, the other blue hat, Robert Catesby. He was a strong Catholic, Robert, and commenced plans to assassinate King James and eventually recruited Guy Fawkes, who was an explosive expert. In 1605, they rented a vault under the House of Lords. I can't imagine today if we try to rent a room under the House of Parliament, they'd let you do that, but back then you could. And went there with 36 barrels of gunpowder, which would have made a fairly big explosion. The plot was spoiled, as you know, the old saying, loose lips sink ships. Someone spilt some information which saved the king. And don't attend because something horrible is going to happen. So King James was shown the letter, searched, discovered Guy Fawkes and his 36 barrels, and he was saved along with the other scholars who helped with the Bible. So in 1611, King James Version was released and remains the most widely published text in the English language. And again, we've got 40, 50, 60, 70 copies of it sitting in this room here, which we believe is the most accurate. There's other versions that have come off King James and whatever, but predominantly King James, the King James Version being the most accurate from the original. 47 other scholars were involved in its production. And even the Archbishop of Canterbury had a role as overseer. The Archbishop of Canterbury was the guy who put the king's crown on his head a few months ago in London. There's the first copy of it. So I've deliberately omitted the countless numbers of religious wars that have occurred over the last 2,000 years, as you can read. Today we have thousands of churches of numerous denominations all saying that they are right. We read there in Ephesians 4, there is only one way, there is only one God, capital G, not little g. The young kids are not too sure what that is. Big G means it's a real God, little g is a false God, one spirit. And we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men, by the cunning craftiness whereby they lie in wait to deceive. And that's what the Romans were doing and the Roman Catholic Church are doing all the way through, deceit, deceit, deceit. And it's just thousands and thousands, perhaps millions of people weren't able to open their eyes and realise that they're on the wrong boat going to the wrong destination. And here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. The Pope's official title in Latin is Vicarius, whatever that second word is, Vicar, Son of God. If you add that up using Roman numerals, you get 666. So now there's 2,877 versions of the Bible in 1,918 languages. And mankind keeps changing and adding to the original, Greek and Hebrew. The King James Version is the most accurate translation of God's wonderful word. We read, just coming to an end now, if any man shall take away the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book. And we've been singing songs about meeting the Lord and the Lord's coming back and whatever. We know we've got everything right here. We've got the scriptures right. Our walk on the Lord's right. We get, Hebrews 10:25, forsake not the fellowshipping of the saints. Just keep doing that and we'll be there. But those who've done all the damage along the way, well, there's no place for them. And we're going to leave it there, folks. Thanks very much.
Praise the Lord. Had a good day, haven't we?